Welcome and welcome back to Alive to Thrive 21 Tools to Pursue Your Passions Fiercely and Confidently. My name is Mihaela Dorina, and I'm your host during this interview series. And today I have the pleasure and honor to interview Veronica Archer. Veronica, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into the secret of getting unstuck with you. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Veronica. Veronica Archer is an intuitive transformation coach guiding narcissistic trauma survivors to be open to being loved again, know the gifts of their empathetic nature, and authentically live their life purpose. Veronica's transformation path began after leaving a marriage of 16 years, where she had experienced gaslighting and narcissistic trauma, which had left her with chronic illness and riddled with pain from migraines and fibromyalgia. There was no help to be found in the medical community, and relying on her own background in biology and lifetime of mindfulness practices, Veronica started developing her own process. The chronic depression that had followed her from the age of 12 left, and her fibromyalgia and migraines disappeared. After experiencing consistent joy and wellness, Veronica felt obligated to support others in discovering a life of peace and joy. She is now the owner of Veronica Archer International, where she uses a combination of intuitive guidance, quantum healing, and transformative coaching to guide cycle breakers and legacy makers to live a life free of their past experiences and authentically live their life purpose. Veronica believes that everyone deserves to rediscover the lust for life and natural sense of ease and joy we're all born with, so you can effortlessly create your legacy. Wow, that is such a beautiful journey. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you, Mihaela. It's always
Yeah.
interesting to hear your life summarized in a few sentences.
Yeah, well, and this kind of leads me to this question that I love to ask everybody. I think you gave us the glimpse, but I wanted to ask you what makes you so passionate about your work?
Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, I think there's a couple things that makes me really passionate about it. One is, as was sort of alluded to in the introduction, is that I had experienced so much pain and different, both emotional and physical pain in my life. And then I got to a point where I felt like peaceful and joyful most of the time. And that was, really embracing life and feeling like I was really like living it and engaged with it. And I looked around and I noticed that most people were not. Most people at best were flat, kind of doing their thing, going to their job, whatever, doing all the shoulds. And that's sort of at best. And then most people were really in pain. And so I felt obligated to, I'm like, I know it's possible to live in a way that feels good. And I felt obligated to share that with people. And it's such a joy to see people move out of, a painful situation and then just experience joy again. Yeah, so that's the main reason. Then also on a more meta level, I really believe that when we are all living in a place of wellness and we are then contributing to our planet, and I believe that as each person moves out of pain and into wellness, whatever that looks like for them, we're literally helping the whole planet. So that may feel kind of big, but that's how I feel, and that lights me up too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. It is, as we heal individually, we help others heal, and we have more to give, and we are more available to connect with everything around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. So I know you have a unique, background in trauma, and you speak about imprints and patterns that keep us stuck and in pain. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how do they show up? How do those imprints show up?
Yeah, how do imprints show up? So I'll start first with just describing imprints a little bit in case someone listening maybe isn't familiar with that word. So An imprint, when it comes to psychology and biology, is the way that in mammals and birds, the brains of mammals and birds take on messages in very early in life. Some clinicians say 0 to 3, some say 0 to 7. And so you're literally imprinting a message on the brain, the animal is, in order to ensure its survival, basically. So when we study mammals and birds, what we see is that, you know, they learn how to survive. So part of survival, and so we're talking about relationships here, so we'll talk about that aspect. Part of survival is mating and then having, being able to raise your offspring so that they survive and they can pass on their genes. So the imprints are all related to those kinds of things: how to get food, how to get a mate, how to rear young. So in a biological standpoint, that's where that word comes from, and that's what it means. So I use the word a little more broadly in my work, because I've noticed that, for example, if somebody is in a relationship with a narcissistic, where they're experiencing narcissistic trauma, and let's say they're in that relationship for 30 years, 20 years or 10 years, 5 years, they walk away with certain beliefs and messages that then impact their life. So I also refer to those as imprints when they happen even later in life. So that's generally what an imprint is. So basically what it is, it's a message. So to bring it to us as humans, and in the work that we do here, that you and I do, an imprint is a message that somebody has taken on from an experience, usually an early childhood experience. So I'll give a simple example of a client who was struggling with wanting to just do things that were good for her. Like she wanted to do Qigong, you know, daily gentle exercises, or eating well. And in her case, it was specifically Qigong and some exercises. And she was dealing with chronic pain. And she was like, I know that Qigong would help me feel better. And I know that I'm physically able to do it. So there's no limitations there. And yet, like, my mind is like stopping me from doing it. Like, I just will not do it. And I'm sure people listening probably experience that a lot, right? We all have experienced what we call procrastination or laziness, which, by the way, I don't believe is a thing. And here's why. So we were talking about this. And so we kind of went through a somatic process where we dove into what may be preventing her from meeting her own needs. And through that reprinting process, or that somatic process, she discovered for herself that when she was very young, when she asked for a need to be met, she experienced, how did she word it? It was very dramatic. She experienced like severe pain. In other words, she was beaten, right? So 2-year-old crying for food, her crying would be met by being beaten, right? So she goes, every time I ask for something, for one of my needs to be met, I experience severe pain. Okay, well, you're not going to ask for your own need to be met, even from yourself, because somewhere in your subconscious, you believe that you're going to experience extreme pain. So that's one example of how it may show up. Do you have any questions about that before I can give an example about relationships and how it shows up there?
Yeah, I was gonna say that would be great if you could talk about maybe emotional pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the way that it may show up in a relationship, right? So we can use that a similar example of, let's say, when you were very young, whenever you asked for your needs to be met, or let's just say your needs weren't met, right? So for whatever reason, your parents were self-absorbed, or maybe abusive, maybe neglectful, but for whatever reason, your needs weren't met. So then as you grow up, you may have taken on the message that my needs aren't important. It is my job to take care of other people's needs, right? So let's say your needs weren't met and you had siblings, and so you were always taking care of your siblings. So now, when you grow up, you're in this place of, you believe it's your needs aren't important, and it's your job to take care of everybody else's needs. That can turn into, this overgiving that happens, where your needs are never a priority and you're just giving, giving, giving. So somebody like that, who's always not, and again, nothing wrong with giving. We all like giving, it feels good, but there's this overgiving and never putting your needs first because you believe on a subconscious level that they're not important. you may end up, it's very likely actually that you will end up with someone who's a taker. So if you're like, I always end up with people who take, my needs are never met, and I don't understand why I can't meet a loving, giving person who gives as much as I do. Well, it's polarity, really. If you're always giving, 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 you're going to match like a magnet with someone who's always taking, taking, taking. So that's one way where that imprint from childhood may show up in your relationships. And so then when you can understand that, no, it's not that, let's just say you and I are both women. So let's say all men are selfish takers. You know, a man may have the same experience and may feel all women are selfish takers, right? So that may be the belief you start having because that's what you keep experiencing, not realizing on a subconscious level, you're creating it because you're always giving, giving, giving. So once you understand, oh, I believe on some level that my needs aren't important, and then you can start shifting that. You can start meeting your own needs and prioritizing your own needs. Guess what? You're going to start matching with more giving people.
That was, yeah, thank you. That was so helpful, the way you described it. And how do we shift? What do we do? It sounded so easy.
That's the question, right? Yeah. You want me to answer that? How do we shift?
Yeah. How do we shift out of those, especially if they come all the way from childhood? I mean, you talked a little bit about how that can happen later in life too.
Yeah.
But especially if you carry that imprint for so long, how can that be healed or shifted out of?
So the beautiful news is that it can be shifted. And I'm just going to get on my soapbox for a minute because this is one of my pet peeves, because I hear in the healing community, and I've heard from my clients that they believe, or they've been told by another practitioner of some kind, that it's not possible to heal. I'll put that words in quotes for a variety of reasons, but it's not possible to heal from a particular characteristic that you have or pain that you have. The best that you can do is navigate those, is manage the symptoms, navigate the symptoms. Depression's a great example, right? I believe that I just had depression and I would just have to manage the symptoms. It's not true. You really can truly, fully shift and integrate and be free from the negative impacts of those characteristics. So how do you do that? So I work in a sort of three-part process. So one is under recognizing the patterns and recognizing the imprints. And I will say that it can be challenging to see your own patterns and your own imprints. One thing that I've discovered quite often, and I've, by the way, been in this boat myself, you know, when you're educated in I shouldn't say educated, but informed and into personal development, you may be really intuitive, successful, independent, right? You're like, I can figure this out on my own. And I definitely was in that space as well. But there's this saying a colleague of mine says, which I love, which is, you can't see your own eyeball. I mean, I guess you can in a mirror, but just without a mirror, like just in life, right? You can't see.
But you still need the mirror.
You still need them. That's right. You need the mirror, right? So you kind of need someone to be that mirror for you. So the first is recognizing patterns. And so where I was going with that is that oftentimes we do see the patterns. We're like, I see the pattern. Okay. I'm always with emotionally unavailable people. I'm always with takers. We'll use that since we started with that. I see the pattern. But so how do you identify the imprint? So that's one thing that I start with when I work with people is I'm able to recognize patterns in others through intuition, through experience, through listening to languaging. Languaging is huge. People don't realize how much they're speaking actually what they're creating and experiencing. So understanding the pattern and what's underneath the pattern, what's causing it. Once you understand that, then I work in reprinting. There's different ways that you can do that. It's really important so the way that I work in reprinting is I see the system. So the human being is a system, right? Not just a physical body. So I kind of view it as two triangles. The bottom triangle is the cognitive, the emotional, and the somatic, the physical. So most people view that as the body, right? Mind, emotions, body. And then the other triangle is your energy, your energetics. And there's energy that runs through our body. Some people call that chi. There's different words for it. Then there's our actual energy body that we put out outside of ourselves. And then there's the energy that's all around us in the world. And we interact with and experience on all those layers. So there's the 3 energetic layers and then the 3 physical layers. So in reprinting, the imprint that we took on as in our childhood is showing up in all these different layers. So what I discover most often is people maybe have done therapy or journaling, positive affirmations. That's mostly on the cognitive, sometimes on the emotional. Now there's some, all kinds of beautiful modalities out there like somatic experiencing that address more of the somatic. And then there's energy work, right? So being able to see how your imprint is showing up on all your levels, and to reprint the system to a new message. So in other words, if the message was my needs aren't important, you can start reprinting to believing that your needs are important. And so we'll follow that through. So the way you do that is you would speak it. So that's sort of like affirmations, but you would start by speaking it. My needs are important. Then you would need to feel it. Like when you say my needs are important, what comes up? Is it fear? Is it that's freaking bullshit? Is it like you'll feel it in your body? And so then you want to start being able to really feel in your body that your emotions are important. And then also noticing how it's vibrating around you in your energy field. So when I do reprinting, I look at all those different layers. So first, understanding the imprint, the pattern, and the imprint underneath the pattern. Reprinting on all 6 layers. There's a 7th layer, which is source. We don't really print source, but
Yeah.
and then the third part that I support people with is action and coaching and mentorship. So, okay, I understand the imprint. I'm reprinting it on my system. I feel different in my body. Now, how do I take that and actually act different in my life? Now, when you reprint in your system, sometimes you start acting different in your life. It's so beautiful because it just happens organically. Like there's not a lot of like thinking and doing. It just happens. And also there are habits that we have and patterns that we have that it's very easy to slip back into. So I think it's Dr. Gary Salyer that has a saying that I love, which is act your way into a new way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we try to think our way into a new way of acting. We're like willpower, like I understand it. I'm going to change my habits. I'm going to do that Qigong, like the client that I had earlier, or talked about earlier. But then you can't get yourself to do it. So sometimes you have to act your way into a new way of thinking. Okay, I'm going to put myself first, even though it feels uncomfortable. I'm going to do self-care. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to say no. So taking action. So that's basically the 3 parts. So 1 is seeing your patterns, understanding the imprints. 2 is reprinting in your system. And then 3 is acting differently in your life.
Yeah, that was so beautifully explained. I love that process. And I'm a visual person, so I can see the different dimensions, when you spoke about the energy and the body, and it actually made me think of because you're also an intuitive coach, and you talk about like helping people connect to their own intuition. At what point does that happen in the process, and how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Connecting with your intuition is something I love talking about. And oftentimes it just comes through in the process. What was your question? How does it feed into the process?
Yeah, so how do you support clients to connect to their own intuition so they can trust themselves, after a certain point, and just listen to that voice instead of the other.
Yeah, exactly. Listen to the intuitive voice instead of the other voices. Such a good question, and such an important part of the process. I really believe that being able to hear your own intuition is like one of the keys to life. If I can support someone in hearing their own intuition, then like maybe they don't need me anymore. Like Michael, when I work with people, it's like you work together and then you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
So ultimately I believe that like your intuition is, there's all of us have within ourselves like our core self, our core essence. And then and that core essence is talking to us all the time, through our body, through where we talked together about symptoms that might be coming up in our bodies, right? It's talking to you through just the voice in your head. I mean, it's talking to you all the time. And then our life experience is like layered on top of that core self. And those life experiences oftentimes create armoring or facades, emotions, triggers, all these things. And it can be difficult to decipher between all this gunk that's on top and our core self. And part of it is understanding what those layers are and starting to peel them away so that the core self is louder and you can hear it. What I've actually found in the work that I've done, and maybe it's simply the people I've worked with, is that I think we all have intuition, because coming from a biology background, all animals have instinct. You don't have to teach an animal how to instinctively hunt. There is some level of teaching. Obviously, their parents teach the young, right? We all have intuition, whatever you want to call it. Some people are uncomfortable with that word. Some people really embrace, our psychic gifts, if you will. We all have a level of intuition. And what I found most often from clients is that they come to me and let's say they've had an emotionally difficult, toxic relationship. Almost always they say, I knew at the very beginning and I overrode it, right? And so people tell me that they don't know how to hear their intuition, or that they're not intuitive. And they will also say things like that. I knew and I overrode it, right? So that knowing is your intuition. So it's not so much about supporting people and hearing it, it's teaching them to trust it. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do, and I encourage those of you listening to do, is to start an intuitive hits journal. So you could go back in time. When did I know something and I overrode it? And then I later discovered I should have gone with that knowing because it was right. But in present day, you can also just start listening to that knowing, whatever. It feels different for different people. Some people feel it in their gut, some people feel it in their head, some people feel it in their heart. Some people hear it as like a voice in their head. So, if you're listening, you're like, I don't know how to do this. Just tune in to when you've had that knowing, and then start writing it down, and do it for small things. So a lot of people want to tap into their intuition when they have a big decision to make. Relationship, money, career, health, right? They're like, oh, I don't know, my intuition, I can't tell, because they're not practiced. And then they want to be able to, like, it's like a runner wanting to go from, those programs, couch potato to marathon.
Yeah.
Right. And they want to do it like without the 6 months in between or whatever. So keep an intuitive hits journal, write down when you think you have an intuitive hit over something small, like driving a different way to work. One day I drove home a different way from someplace, and I've been wanting a new desk, and I had a visual of exactly what I wanted. And I drove down the street that I never drive down. And I'm like, why am I driving down the street? And there was my desk. It was being given away. Somebody had put it out on the curb. They didn't want it anymore. It was literally exactly what I wanted. I was like, oh, that's why I was supposed to drive this way today.
Wow.
Keep it small, write things down, and know that you're going to be wrong. And being wrong is good, because if you write something down that you think is an intuitive hit, and then later on you're like, well, that wasn't right. Good, because now think about, what did it feel like? I thought that was an intuitive hit and it wasn't. What did that feel like? And then when you have something that's an intuitive hit and it turns out to be correct or comes to fruition, what did that feel like? And the more you practice it, the stronger your intuition is going to be. And then the more you're going to know, oh, that's what intuition feels like. That's what emotions feel like. Or my brain overriding me. And you start learning what each one feels like.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of how sometimes it can be difficult to discern, like if your body, for example, if you're having a trauma response and your body's saying, no, this is not safe, you like, how do you know if it's intuition? Should I listen? Should I try to override it?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it can be difficult, especially if you're having a trauma response, or you're feeling anxiety, or you're feeling really emotional about something. And I have heard people say, "Oh, my intuition is telling me," and I'm over here feeling. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's your emotions. I'm pretty sure it's fear or resistance, or So practice is one way, and then also learning how to breathe to regulate your system. So if you believe that you're having a trauma response, so you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling really emotional, to take deep diaphragmatic breaths. So I use the 5-2-7 breaths. There's different ones out there. The 5-2-7 is inhale for 5, hold for 2, and then exhale for 7. And for people listening, you can do different counts. The key really is that your exhale is longer than your inhale, because that's what triggers our nervous system into our calm, and it triggers you out of the fight or flight. So long exhale. And then if you're trying to make a decision, you're not sure if it's emotions or intuition, do the breathing, and then also just wait. So I have found that intuition is consistent, and like, I'll get the same message over and over, and it'll show up in different ways. A friend will suddenly say something that's similar to what I was thinking, or emotions tend to kind of come and go, and they tend to be more roller coaster, tend to be more extreme. Yeah, so if you're able to just wait and ride through the emotions and then come back to it, and ask yourself again.
So you're still speaking about the journaling process.
Yeah, the journaling, or just if you're like not sure if something is intuitive, like if you're trying to make a decision and you want to use your intuition and you're not sure, then do some breathing practices, set the decision aside, and then come back in a day or 2 or 3 and see what comes up.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that tool. I've never heard of intuitive hits journal. I like that. I have a practice of doing a gratitude journal in the morning, but I'm very intrigued by this idea of
Yes, I love the intuitive hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of along lines, different but similar, because you mentioned the gratitude journal. One of the things I love to do is an intention journal. So most days I'll write down my intention, could be for the day or the week or the year. And then I'll go, this is what I mentioned earlier, words are powerful. And then I like to go back, and I like to do it together with my gratitude journal. And then I can go back and look and see how many of my intentions have come to fruition. And that's really satisfying and encouraging. And so that's a practice I love.
Yeah, and I imagine it also builds trust with yourself.
It does. It builds trust. Yeah, because you start noticing how much control, I don't like the word control, how much influence you have over your own life, that you're not just subject to the whim of whatever, some outside force.
Right, but also, this idea that it's like a lot of times we know we're just maybe too scared to do what we know is good for us, or it might not be fear, it might be something else, like your client that you mentioned with the qigong. There might be another block.
Yes, absolutely. It does build trust. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe we're almost out of time. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for doing such a beautiful job of describing visually too. I feel like it was so helpful for me to see even when you were using your hands. Is there anything else that you would encourage someone who's watching to start doing today that would make a difference in terms of getting them unstuck, maybe?
Yes. So the things that we hit on, breathing. So if you're someone who doesn't practice there's all kinds of different breathing practices, but if you don't do any and you're struggling with being stuck, or if you've had, difficult experiences and you're dealing with anxiety or fear or things like that, is to do the deep breathing and like the 5-2-7 breath, and just do that like 3 times a day. So the breathing, and then the intentions and the gratitude journal for me have been life-changing. They're so simple, and there are, oh, now I want to change my free gift. There are some guidelines to writing effective intentions, to really like power up your life. And so actually, Mihaela, this is off the cuff, but I think I'm going to provide a bonus free gift on writing powerful intentions, because it's so life-changing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome. And the gratitude as well. Yeah, those two
Yeah.
practices.
Oh, I absolutely love my gratitude journal, and sometimes I do it twice a day. I like to do it first thing in the morning because I just like to start my day being in that space. But sometimes it's just like I have an amazing day, and or something. I could just grab it and write what happened, and it feels
Yeah.
really, really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really interested in the intentions journal, and especially the intuitive hits journal. I think I'm going to start adding that to my
Awesome.
daily practice.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, again, thank you so much for everything that you shared with us, and for the work that you do in the world to support people. But before we wrap up, do you want to tell everyone if you have a free gift for our audience?
Of course, yeah. So I have a free gift. It's the 5 pillars of the reprinting process. So if what I spoke about earlier with imprints and reprinting, and how to even start thinking about doing that, it's a couple short, or actually one video on the process and the 5 kind of phases to reprinting. And then, as I just mentioned, I'm going to throw in a bonus free gift on writing powerful intentions, because it's life-changing.
Well, that's going to go in my gratitude journal tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Mihaela. This was so much fun.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much again. And to those of you listening, I'll see you in the next interview. Bye, everyone.